Today, I'll speak on W.H. Auden. The title of my lecture is Ethical Understanding in the Poetry of W.H. Auden. Auden's poetry is linked with the Marxian idea of progress and the principle of evolution. One may see the image of the wanderer, the figure of a political revolutionary, seeking for a qualitative change. Auden and his contemporary poets were convinced of the urgent need of a radical change in the structure of the society. In Dog Beneath the Skin, for instance, the successful end of the search of the missing baronet ultimately turns to be the quest for a new political and social organization. In poem entitled The Love Letter, one finds a more poetic and suggestive picture of the wanderer who has been from the very first coming down in a new valley, experiencing complete alienation. The realization of human values is of primary importance throughout Auden's poetry, and he has ever since stressed the need of a personal change of heart. It is in terms of human beings that he sees the political issues, and in terms of human values that he sees the solution. Thus, his quest is founded largely on the idea of moral evolution and spiritual growth. The individual, if at all he wishes to survive, has to identify himself with the will of evolving life force, as otherwise he has to face automatic extinction. In his early works, Auden shows compassion and sympathy for the man who accepts the challenge of active life and leaves his house with firm determination to proceed on a voyage of quest. Such a man is impelled by a strong urge of his will and is determined to face the difficulties and deviations involved in the journey. He cannot be determined from his mission by family bonds and emotional attachments. No cloud, soft hand can hold him, restrained by women, but ever that mangoes through place keepers through forest trees, a stranger to stranger over undried sea. As Auden is interested in the order and harmony of life, he pictures his voyager as a man of earnest will, determined to come out of his unhealthy state of existence and move on in quest of better condition of greater moral freedom and spiritual harmony. The harmony of the spirit can be achieved only when a requisite social order has been attained and the ailment of the human psyche, bred by the frustrating convention of the earlier social order, has been cured and tension released. Thus, in this pattern we find Auden's effort at a synthesis of social, psychological and spiritual end. The actual journey takes place inside the heart of man, the heart being both the subject and object of the voyage in quest, as it is suggested to begin and end with change of heart. Temptation, described in the sonnets written by W.H. Auden, deal with the inner dilemma of the exceptionally gifted human beings who evidently are in quest of a principle of self-gratification rather than spiritual resurgence. Their position is beautifully summed up in the sonnet 9 entitled The Tower, in which there is clear indication that the tower that embodies the unique attainment of the exceptional man may turn into an ivory tower for their isolation and escape, in whose spell they are to be miserably caught. The poet says, the desert glared into his blood-shot eyes. The silence roared displeasure. The silence roared displeasure. Looking down, he saw the shadow of an average man. He saw the shadow of an average man attempting the exceptional and ran. The cause of the general unhappiness of man is that today loneliness is man's real condition. Auden earnestly felt that in the literary works of the writers there should be clear and straight moral and ethical order for the disturbed and anxious society. Historically, it is the modern age of science and materialism which has widespread restlessness, frustration and self-contempt. The whole situation of Auden's age, besides being symbolic of the anxiety-ridden world, is quite realistic of our life. In the mid-20th century, with the Second World War in the background, the point which Auden intends to bring in his ethical view that there is absolute futility of a world without faith in God. Beneath the apparent layers of psychological and pathological meaning in the age of anxiety, we can easily discover the poet's religious outlook of seeking how man can be happy. The ultimate and sought after is always the condition of man's happiness, which is denied to him because of his willful negation of the religious truth, the faith in divine grace. Man himself is responsible for his alienation from God. We can say that the final impact of Auden's poetry is usually one of intellectual appeal and general awareness of one's self and environment. His ideas, political or clean, ethical, is closely related to his personality. W.H. Auden seems to stand outside the experience which has resulted in the detachment of the poet from the object of treatment. His poetry makes us consciously receptive of the truth. The basic concern of the poet is love in its various aspects. Like Shelley, Auden seems to believe in the efficacy of love as a key to both individual and social happiness and well-being. We have noticed that the quest for the good place or just city, in other words, for a happy society, is deeply related with Auden's treatment of love. A.S. Collins, writing on Auden, stresses his point very effectively. In the modern darkness, when hatred, fear, death were in the air and men are sick of soul, feeble, selfish, despairing, it was time to seek redemption and to learn in suffering the way, the truth and the life, no more turning our back upon the vision. Frustration, dissatisfaction and unsettlement hung over the world when Auden made a mark as a poet in the early 30s. Such a world, Auden felt, needed a change of heart. In the age of violence and hatred, he looked for the opposite values of peace. In his poems, he established hopefully faith in God and peace. The whole world of Auden is an integral whole, but at the same time, it would be wrong to comment that it is religious thought, which accords continuity to Auden's poetry. While it is difficult to reconcile Auden's early and later poetry on the basis of religious thoughts, his search for growth of healthy love can be logically shown to have led him to Freud, Marx, and Christianity successfully and successively. For Auden's love, in a way of life for mankind, love is the means of survival in the modern society. The poet begins with early love, describing firstly the love of one's own interests, and then we find love in a higher form, that is to say, the love of one's neighbor in the pursuit to fulfill the second commandment. The erotic or romantic love is considered to be inadequate in the world of 30s. In As I Walked Out, one evening we get the idea that Auden finds personal or romantic love inadequate. The glacier knock in the cupboard, the desert sight in the bed, and the crack in the teacup opens a lane to the land of the dead. This grim reality reminds the lover to be aware of such love. For Auden, it is time to reject the erotic love as a complete answer. The world is love. The world is love. The world is love. Surely one fearless kiss would cure the million fevers, a stroking brush, the insensitive refuse from the burning core. Was there a dragon who had closed the works while the starved city fed it with the Jews? Then love would come it. Then love would tame it with his trainer's look. We find that Auden's lifelong quest for unraveling the nature of love finds a fitting culmination beginning with Freudian and Marxian overtones. Auden moves to Christian theology, but ultimately he relies on its broad and universal meaning to find a fulfillment of his ideas in a calm mood of acceptance and atonement. Auden is, from first to last, a moralist with deep, serious ethical views who wants his poems to arouse his audience into critical self-awareness and to incite them to reform. Yet he rejects all attempts, including some of his own, early sermonizing to tell the reader exactly what the moral truth is, what the ethical value is. Thank you. So today we have done W.H. Auden, a very prominent poet of English literature who thrived in 30s and who talks about ethical values in our life and in philosophy. And he has formed a very great opinion about life and society and religion in his own way. In one stroke, he talks of Marxism, and then he talks of Christian values at the same time. There is similarity and at the same time there is some contradictions. But we should not forget that W.H. Auden is a great poet who had great values for social reform. Thank you.